In this first episode of our Microsoft Security Podcast series, we're diving into the essentials of security and compliance. I'm Mirko Peters, and over the next 8 episodes, I'll be your guide through everything you need to know to pass the SC-900 certification exam. Today, we're starting with the core security concepts that form the foundation of Microsoft's security framework. Whether you're preparing for certification or just need to understand how to protect your organization's data better, this series will transform you from security novice to confident professional. Let's get started. Why security and compliance are now non-negotiable. Imagine losing sensitive customer data because of a single security oversight. What would that cost your organization? The financial hit might be only the beginning. Think about the ripple effects. Damaged trust with customers, loss of credibility in the industry, even legal consequences that take years to untangle. And here's the harsh truth. This scenario isn't just hypothetical. It's happening every single day. Organizations are now more connected than ever, with remote work becoming the norm and cloud-based tools dominating the tech landscape. While these advancements make work more flexible and collaborative, they also expose businesses to unprecedented risks. Data, once safely locked inside corporate networks, is now accessed remotely from personal devices, coffee shop Wi-Fi, and across different regions of the world. It may sound like a small shift, but this expanded access means your data isn't just inside your walls anymore, it's everywhere. For businesses, that everywhere introduces a blend of opportunity and vulnerability, especially when you consider compliance requirements combined with rising cyber threats. One of the most well-known consequences of a data breach is financial penalties. But what does that really look like? Consider companies that have been fined millions, or in some cases billions, for failing to properly manage sensitive information. Beyond financial losses, there's reputational damage that often has a longer-lasting impact than even the fines themselves. After all, trust is arguably an organization's most valuable currency. Think of this. Would you trust a company with your personal data if you knew they had leaked sensitive customer information just a year ago? These aren't just technical challenges, they're tangible risks that affect every corner of an organization. Let's take it a bit closer to home. Professionals working with Microsoft tools and platforms, whether you're building apps in Azure, analyzing data in Power BI, or even collaborating in Microsoft Teams, are impacted by security and compliance every day. Here's an example. You're sharing product research and financial forecasts in an Excel file stored in SharePoint. On the surface, everything might seem fine. Now imagine that file being accidentally shared with the wrong party, or worse, intercepted by a malicious actor. Without proper security measures and the right controls for compliance, even well-intentioned users can create vulnerabilities. And in most cases, responsibility doesn't fall to a single team, it's an organizational effort. That's why understanding these principles isn't just a task for IT departments, it's a business priority. When you dig into the numbers, the situation becomes even clearer. According to one recent report, the cost of cybercrime globally is expected to hit over $10 trillion annually by 2025. That's not just a corporate issue, that's an economy-wide issue. Compliance violations, while often tied to legal standards, carry consequences just as severe, from PR crises to operational disruptions that leave teams scrambling to recover. And while security and compliance used to sit in distinct silos, in today's interconnected world, the line between them has become blurry. Security ensures data stays protected, while compliance makes sure those protections meet legal and ethical standards. Together, they create a foundation of trust. Now, you might be thinking, that's all well and good, but I'm not in IT. Why should any of this matter to me? If your role involves working with data in any capacity, whether you're analyzing, storing, sharing, or reporting, it's absolutely relevant. You might not need to configure firewalls or audit compliance frameworks, but having awareness of how data security and compliance impact your workflows can completely change how you approach your job. Imagine a scenario where you're tasked with creating a dashboard in Power BI to present sensitive performance stats for a client. If sensitive data isn't handled properly or compliance measures aren't applied, misuse could lead to serious repercussions, even if you weren't the one managing the backend network. Understanding the basics gives you the foresight to identify potential risks before they become problems. That said, it's easy to feel overwhelmed. Cybersecurity threats evolve daily, legal standards shift every few years, and the tools we use to secure and manage data seem to grow more complex with each iteration. It can feel like a lot to juggle. But here's the good news. There are solutions specifically designed to simplify these challenges. Microsoft has spent years developing tools to address these complexities. From compliance management dashboards to automated threat detection, the right tools can streamline even the most daunting tasks. If this all feels dense, don't worry. Simplifying these frameworks into actionable insights is exactly what the Microsoft security ecosystem is designed to do. Think about encryption for a moment. Many professionals don't need to know the specific algorithms powering it, but understanding how it keeps data unreadable to unauthorized users, that's empowering. Similarly, compliance dashboards built into Microsoft Purview offer visual clarity around regulatory risks, so even non-specialists can make informed decisions. What's powerful about getting data security and compliance right is that they move beyond being just technical necessities. They become competitive advantages. Imagine being able to tell clients with confidence, your data is secured and managed in compliance with global standards. It's no longer just about avoiding disasters. It's about building trust and providing peace of mind, whether it's a customer choosing who to bank with or a client deciding between two service providers. Organizations that demonstrate strong security stand out. Take remote work. Employees today expect access to company files and tools from anywhere, but with that shift comes added vulnerabilities, phishing attempts through email, insecure home network connections, compromised credentials, and more. Even something as seemingly simple as logging into a work account through a public Wi-Fi network could lead to breaches. Addressing these risks is no longer optional. And it's not limited to high-security industries like finance or healthcare. Every business managing private information faces these same challenges. Yet here's a key takeaway. Mitigating those risks doesn't have to be overly complex when broken into core strategies. Solutions like setting up multi-factor authentication across Microsoft 365 accounts or creating retention policies for archived emails help bridge the gap between compliance and day-to-day operations. The focus should be less on reactive measures like scrambling to fix breaches and more on proactive strategies to prevent them in the first place. Prevention builds trust. Trust builds growth. So where does all this lead us? It starts with seeing security and compliance not as burdens, but as strategic enablers. They enable transparency, which customers value deeply. They streamline operations by reducing legal risks and compliance fines. And perhaps most importantly, they bring clarity within teams by setting boundaries, defining who should access what and under what conditions. As we dive deeper into Microsoft's approach to security, one thing will become clear. Almost every tool from Azure to Defender is designed with shared responsibility in mind. You might wonder, how does responsibility for security divide between an organization and its cloud provider? That's exactly what we'll break down next. But in the meantime, hold on to this thought. Security and compliance aren't just stopgaps for crises. They're the foundation for building trust, driving innovation, and achieving success in this interconnected world. Understanding the shared responsibility model. Who's really responsible for keeping your data secure in the cloud? The cloud provider or your organization? It's not as simple as it might seem at first. When people hear about cloud services, they sometimes assume that the provider manages everything: security, backups, updates, the works. But this assumption can lead to serious vulnerabilities and misunderstandings. To avoid those gaps, you need to understand a concept called the shared responsibility model. It breaks down who handles what in terms of security and management depending on the type of cloud service you're using. So, what exactly does the shared responsibility model cover? It's a framework that divides security responsibilities between you, the customer, and your cloud provider. The idea is straightforward. The cloud provider takes care of certain foundational elements like physical security at their data centers, but you still manage parts like data protection and user access. It's not all outsourced just because the infrastructure is in the cloud, and knowing your specific responsibilities can make all the difference in keeping data safe. Let's clear up some misconceptions right away. One of the most common is the idea that by using cloud services, you've handed all your security needs over to the provider. But that's not true. While the provider will secure their facilities, their servers, and certain parts of the software configuration, they don't handle everything. Your data is still yours to protect, and so is ensuring safe practices among your users. The exact balance of who does what depends on which cloud model you're using: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service. Each comes with its own mix of shared duties, which can get a little tricky to navigate without a closer look. Let's start with infrastructure as a service, or IaaS, which is the most flexible and the most demanding cloud service model. Think of it as renting an empty lot and some basic utilities where you're free to build whatever you like. The cloud provider will handle things like the physical servers, networking and storage, as well as securing their data centers. But once you start using the platform, you're responsible for configuring the operating systems you install, making sure your applications are secure, and most importantly, managing the data you upload. Consider servers hosted through Azure. Microsoft ensures that their physical infrastructure is safe and available, but things like securing logins to your virtual machines or configuring firewalls are entirely up to you. If you don't lock down these elements, leaving them vulnerable, that's not something a cloud provider can fix retroactively. Next, we have Platform as a Service, or PaaS. Here's where things shift slightly. Instead of starting from scratch, you get a robust foundation to build and deploy applications without managing the underlying infrastructure. Imagine you're working in a pre-built workshop where most of the tools and utilities are already set up for you. As a developer or IT professional, you're focused on creating and scaling your applications. A key example is using Azure App Service, where your concern is the application code and the data it processes, while Microsoft manages core aspects like the operating system and runtime environment. However, once again, your responsibility doesn't simply disappear. The applications you build and the sensitive information they store are still in your hands, meaning policies for data protection and user access remain your job. Then there's Software as a Service, or SaaS. The most hands-off and arguably the simplest model. This is where you use applications that the provider fully manages, like Microsoft 365, where everything from the software updates to the infrastructure is handled on their end. This is often likened to renting a furnished apartment. You don't have to worry about fixing appliances, but how you use the space is entirely your responsibility. In SaaS, your focus is primarily on managing your accounts, managing access to sensitive content, and following best practices to keep identities secure. For example, Microsoft manages the application environment for Teams or OneDrive, but when a user accidentally shares a folder with someone outside the organization, it's your policies and proper training that prevent issues. Understanding that SaaS doesn't absolve you from certain oversight is a key part of mastering the shared responsibility model. Let's break this into an analogy everyone can relate to: housing. Imagine 3 different living situations: a vacant lot, a shared workshop, and a fully furnished rental, but in each case, you're responsible for securing your belongings. In the IaaS model, you're renting the lot, so you need to construct buildings, install locks, and control the property. PaaS is like moving into a workshop that's already operational, but you still need to lock away specific tools and files you use. Then in SaaS, you step into a ready-to-use space, but you still have to secure personal valuables inside your apartment. No matter which setup you choose, your data and how users handle accounts represent your responsibility. This analogy usually makes the concept easier to grasp without getting lost in technical details. A critical takeaway here is that no matter how much management your cloud provider handles, responsibility for your data remains with you. It's an industry standard recommendation to treat security in the cloud as a shared effort, not a one-sided arrangement. Even in the most comprehensive SaaS scenarios, you must implement strong data governance policies and stay vigilant over access controls. Why? Because at the end of the day, only your organization has the authority to define who gets access to files, who can share information externally, and how long critical data should be retained. Let's look at a statistic for perspective. In more than 90% of cloud security breaches, the root cause is misconfiguration or user error, not a failure of the provider's infrastructure. This highlights how the human side of cybersecurity can't be ignored, even when technology seems to handle much of the heavy lifting. Misunderstanding the division of responsibility within these models only increases the likelihood of these errors occurring. But why does all this matter so much in today's business environment? Organizations are moving to the cloud faster than ever, driven by the need for speed, scalability, and remote collaboration. But this acceleration sometimes outpaces security planning. Not knowing where your responsibilities begin and end can lead to costly oversights. If you assume your cloud provider is patching systems you're actually supposed to monitor, you might miss critical vulnerabilities. Similarly, if you don't address gaps in user training or data classification, no infrastructure-level security measure will save you from a breach. Now, think specifically about transitioning to the cloud. Whether you're moving an on-premises database to an Azure SQL instance or adopting Microsoft 365 company-wide, understanding the shared responsibility model isn't just a technical exercise. It's a practical roadmap for staying secure. For example, before migrating, you would evaluate what data needs additional encryption or determine which employees need access to certain services. This level of upfront planning prevents surprises later when you realize data protections weren't applied correctly. The cloud brings incredible advantages, but it also shifts the way organizations handle risk. In traditional on-premises setups, IT departments had more direct control over everything from hardware to software. Cloud services distribute that control, which has its benefits but also requires organizations to adapt their strategies. Understanding the shared responsibility model ensures there are no gaps in that adaptation. Ultimately, the payoff for understanding and adopting the framework is control. By knowing exactly which aspects of security fall on your shoulders, you can implement the right policies without unnecessary guesswork. You'll also avoid surprises like discovering too late that a specific setting you thought the provider managed was actually your responsibility all along. More importantly, it empowers your team to make proactive decisions about safety measures instead of relying solely on reactive fixes after an incident occurs. Now let's take that idea and extend it further. If cloud security requires a shared effort, how do you ensure that no single failure brings everything down? How do you build in layers of protection so that even if one part of your security stack is compromised, the rest still holds strong? This leads us directly to the next topic, an approach called defense in depth. We'll explore how relying on multiple security layers minimizes risk and provides peace of mind. But for now, remember, mastering the shared responsibility model starts with understanding its purpose, dividing tasks while maintaining accountability for your data, no matter how it's stored or accessed. The power of defense in depth. If one layer of your security fails, do you have backups to keep your data safe? It's a question that gets to the heart of the defense in depth strategy. No single security measure, no matter how advanced, can completely eliminate risk. Attackers constantly adapt, vulnerabilities are discovered unexpectedly, and sometimes even human error plays a role in creating cracks in your defenses. That's why relying on just one layer of protection is risky. Defense in depth offers a different approach, layering multiple security measures so that even if one fails, the others still protect your systems and data. At its core, defense in depth is about redundancy and comprehensive coverage. It uses multiple independent layers: physical security, identity management, network security, and more, to safeguard against threats at every level. The goal is clear: reduce the risk of breaches by increasing the difficulty for attackers at every step. Layers work in harmony, ensuring that access to sensitive data is as complex and secure as possible. But how does this look in practice, and why is it so much more effective than a single measure? Let's consider the risks of relying on one security barrier. Think of it as locking a house with just one lock. If that lock is broken or bypassed, the entire house is vulnerable. This is exactly what can happen in a cybersecurity setup with only one line of defense. Here's an example. Imagine a network that relies solely on perimeter firewalls for protection. If those firewalls have a misconfiguration or are overwhelmed by an attack, an intruder could bypass them with ease, gaining access to unhardened internal systems. Many high-profile breaches have started this way, with attackers leveraging a single weak point to compromise an entire system. And the reality is that security gaps are inevitable if you don't plan for layers of protection. So, what do these layers of defense in depth actually look like? Let's break it down, starting from the foundational physical level. Physical security may not sound like a cybersecurity topic, but it's critical. Data centers that host your servers, and by extension your data, need strict controls to prevent unauthorized physical access. Things like batch-restricted entry, biometric scanners, and 24/7 surveillance are standard practices in safeguarding these facilities. Microsoft data centers, for example, use multiple levels of physical security to protect against threats like trespassers or sabotage. Physical infiltration could lead to catastrophic exposure of data, but this layer ensures that even before attackers consider digital access, they're facing a nearly impenetrable wall. The next layer moves into identity management. This is the frontline defense against unauthorized access to accounts, and it's where many organizations find themselves most vulnerable. Weak passwords, reused credentials, and employees falling victim to phishing attacks are common entry points for bad actors. Identity management tools like multi-factor authentication, MFA, and conditional access policies provide the next layer of defense by making it far more difficult for someone to use stolen credentials to gain access. For instance, even if someone manages to steal a user's password, MFA requires a secondary verification step, like a code sent to their phone, dramatically reducing the likelihood of misuse. Microsoft solutions such as Azure Active Directory take this a step further with conditional access that dynamically assesses risks based on factors like user location or device health before granting access. Moving deeper, we find perimeter security, measures designed to shield your environment from external threats. One of the key protections here is the prevention of distributed denial of service, DDoS attacks. These attacks overwhelm systems with fake traffic, making them unavailable to legitimate users. Microsoft provides DDoS protection services that automatically absorb and mitigate these attacks before they even reach your applications. Without perimeter security, systems could become overloaded, leaving critical business functions inaccessible during an active attack. Then we have network security, an internal safeguard designed to limit the damage if someone manages to bypass the perimeter. By using methods like network segmentation, organizations can restrict how different parts of a network communicate with each other. This minimizes an attacker's ability to move laterally once they've breached one point. Think of this as compartmentalizing a ship. If one section floods, bulkheads prevent water from spreading to the entire vessel. Tools like Microsoft Azure's network security offerings allow for strict control of resource communication, helping contain potential attackers to one portion of the network. At the compute level, protection centers around securing virtual machines and other cloud-hosted resources. This involves practices like ensuring only necessary ports are open, encrypting data on virtual machines, and employing endpoint detection solutions to spot unusual activity. Compute-level security is critical because it prevents attackers from taking direct control of the systems that process and store data. Without safeguards, these systems could be exploited to launch broader attacks. Next comes application-level security, which focuses on the applications running in your environment. Vulnerabilities in software are often exploited to attack systems. Unsecure web applications or outdated APIs can grant attackers access to sensitive data or enable malicious actions. Remediation steps like secure coding practices, regular vulnerability scanning, and patching play a big role here. For organizations using Microsoft tools, powerful options like Microsoft Defender for Cloud provide advanced application security monitoring, flagging potential exploitable weaknesses before they're used. At the top of this layered cake is data-level security. This is the last line of defense. It assumes all outer layers have been breached and focuses directly on protecting the data itself. Encryption plays a massive role at this stage. By encrypting data both at rest and in transit, you ensure that even if an attacker intercepts it, they can't make sense of the contents without the proper decryption keys. For example, services like Azure Key Vault help securely manage these keys, adding another critical layer of protection. Additionally, access to sensitive data can be tightly controlled through permissions. Users should only have access to what they need for their roles. This is often referred to as the principle of least privilege. So, how do all these layers work together in real scenarios? Let's return to the idea of a fortress. One of the most useful analogies for understanding defense in depth. Imagine a castle with several layers of defense: an outer moat, thick walls, a gatehouse, inner walls, and finally the keep where valuables are stored. The moat, like physical security, deters direct entry. The thick outer walls are like perimeter security, keeping most attackers at bay. The gatehouse, where those entering are inspected, acts like identity management. The inner walls serve as network segmentation, containing threats further. Then, inside the keep, treasure is protected directly, just as encryption protects sensitive data. Each layer adds its own function, but the effectiveness comes from their combined strength. An attacker would have to breach every single layer to succeed. Microsoft's ecosystem aligns perfectly with this philosophy. For example, Azure provides tools at every level of defense in depth, from its physical data center protections to advanced analytics with Microsoft Sentinel for detecting and responding to threats in real time. Azure Security Center unifies visibility across layers, giving organizations a clear way to monitor and strengthen their security posture. By using these tools together, you're not working with a patchwork solution, but instead building an integrated system designed to keep attackers out at different stages. This layered strategy doesn't just safeguard against attackers, it also ensures the three core goals of cybersecurity: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality ensures that sensitive information can only be accessed by authorized users. Integrity safeguards data from tampering, ensuring it remains accurate and trustworthy. And availability guarantees that authorized users can access systems and data when they need them. These goals create the foundation of trusting not just the technology you use, but the strategy behind it. Now, let's bring it back to peace of mind. Defense in depth isn't about eliminating all risks. It's about preparation and redundancy. It acknowledges that breaches might happen, but it ensures those breaches don't lead to catastrophic outcomes. The combination of overlapping layers minimizes weak points and gives you more time to detect and respond to incidents before they spiral out of control. Think of it as having a well-equipped toolbox instead of relying on a single tool to fix every problem. As we've seen, this strategy is both powerful and adaptable. However, what happens when you take an even more extreme view? What if you start from the assumption that every layer of protection is already compromised? That's where the Zero Trust model steps in, an approach specifically designed to address this worst-case scenario. Let's look at how Zero Trust shifts the mindset from locked doors to constant verification and monitoring, and why it's becoming essential in today's security landscape. The Zero Trust mindset: never trust, always verify. What if you treated every connection, even one coming from inside your organization, as a potential threat? It's an approach that completely flips traditional security on its head, and it's what the Zero Trust model is built on. Zero Trust abandons the old assumption that resources within a corporate network are inherently safe. Instead, it works on one overarching principle: never trust, always verify. Every user, device, connection, every single access point is continuously verified as though it could be compromised, even if it's already within your network. With this mindset, Zero Trust shifts security from reactive to proactively rigorous. So why is Zero Trust such a critical change? The answer comes down to how much the modern workplace has evolved. In traditional perimeter-based security, everything inside the corporate network was considered safe, protected by firewalls and other boundary defenses. These strategies were designed for environments where people worked from the same location, accessing local servers. But today, workforces are remote. Cloud-based resources are the norm, and personal devices are often used for professional tasks. The concept of a trusted internal network no longer matches reality. Attackers have learned to exploit this disconnect. A single compromised credential or an overlooked vulnerability can let them bypass those perimeter defenses entirely. Let's look at some examples of what this means in a real-world setting. Say an employee's laptop is stolen. In a perimeter-based system, as long as the attacker is using the laptop to access internal resources, no alarms might be raised because the device is already inside the network. Or consider phishing attacks where stolen credentials grant a malicious actor access to sensitive information without triggering any security controls. These are the gaps Zero Trust aims to close. It acknowledges that trust is a risk in itself, especially with attackers finding increasingly creative ways to exploit weak points. The Zero Trust model hinges on three core principles: explicit verification, least privilege access, and the assumption of breach. Each plays a specific role in creating a security framework that is stronger and more adaptable to modern challenges. The first principle, explicit verification, removes the assumption that users or devices are trustworthy by default. Instead, every access request is checked against multiple factors: who the user is, what device they're using, where they're located, and even what type of data they're trying to access. For example, let's say someone attempts to log in to a Microsoft 365 account from a new country while using an outdated device. Zero Trust wouldn't just allow them in. Instead, it would enforce additional checks, like requiring multi-factor authentication, MFA, or denying the request entirely based on conditional access rules. By verifying access in real time based on rich contextual data, explicit verification helps organizations make smarter, more secure decisions about what resources should remain accessible. Next, there's least privilege access. This principle takes a need-to-know approach. Users and devices are only granted the minimum level of access necessary to perform their tasks and nothing more. For example, an employee working in marketing shouldn't automatically have access to detailed financial records simply because they both share the same internal network. Admin privileges, data permissions, and even access to certain applications are tightly managed to confine potential damage in case of unauthorized activity. Microsoft tools like Azure Active Directory support this by offering just-in-time JIT access, allowing privileged account access for specific timeframes and then automatically revoking it. It's not about blocking people from doing their jobs. It's about ensuring they only reach what they specifically need, reducing the surface area for attacks. Finally, there's the assumption of breach. Traditional security often views breaches as outliers or dramatic events that occur somewhere out there. Zero Trust flips this thinking by operating under the premise that breaches can and will happen, whether through external forces or internal errors. What happens next? The ability to detect, contain, and respond is what makes a difference. For example, network segmentation becomes a key part of this principle. If one segment of a network is compromised, segmentation prevents attackers from freely moving through the entire environment. Similarly, encryption ensures that even if data is accessed, it's indecipherable without the proper decryption keys. Now, for Zero Trust to work, it requires more than just these high-level principles. That brings us to the 6 core pillars that support its implementation: identities, devices, applications, data, infrastructure, and networks. Each pillar represents a specific focus area within a comprehensive Zero Trust architecture. Identities are the foundational building block of the Zero Trust model. Every person, service, or device accessing resources needs to be authenticated and authorized. Microsoft Entra ID, formerly Azure Active Directory, plays a critical role here. With features like modern authentication, single sign-on, and conditional access, it centralizes identity management to consistently verify and monitor access requests across cloud and on-premises resources. For instance, conditional access policies might block access attempts from risky locations or require MFA for high-value activities like downloading sensitive documents. Devices form the next critical layer. Every device connecting to an organization's network needs to meet specific compliance and security standards. A personal smartphone running an outdated OS or missing recent patches might be flagged as risky and blocked from accessing resources. Zero Trust ensures that decision-making here isn't static. It's based on real-time assessments of device health. Microsoft Endpoint Manager provides tools to enforce these compliance checks before a device is granted network access. Moving to applications, this pillar focuses on ensuring that only authorized users can interact with the software and services they're allowed to access. For example, cloud-based apps like Teams or SharePoint Online can have varying levels of control applied to users based on their roles or tasks. Continuous monitoring identifies anomalies like unusual usage patterns that might suggest compromised accounts. Managed properly, this reduces risks stemming from overly broad permissions or unmonitored app activity. Data is perhaps the most visible concern for many organizations. The role of Zero Trust here is to classify, label, and encrypt data to ensure granularity over who can access it and how. Microsoft Information Protection (MIP) tools allow teams to label data based on sensitivity, applying policies to restrict sharing or downloading outside the approved ecosystem. For instance, confidential files shared over email would remain encrypted, making them useless to anyone outside the organization, even if intercepted. Infrastructure naturally comes into play too. Zero Trust requires detailed control over infrastructure resources, whether on-premises or in the cloud. This includes ensuring systems are up-to-date, properly configured, and only accessible by verified users or processes. Technologies like Azure Security Center continuously monitor for configuration vulnerabilities or unpatched software that could act as entry points for attackers. Finally, networks tie together all these elements. Zero Trust enforces security by segmenting networks and limiting cross-traffic between environments. It prevents attackers from moving laterally if they get inside. Networks are protected with real-time threat monitoring, encryption, and even application layer controls to ensure attackers can't gain broader access through misconfigurations or weaknesses. Research suggests these layers work remarkably well. Gartner predicts that by 2025, 60% of enterprises will use Zero Trust as a foundational security principle, citing its ability to reduce attack surfaces and provide adaptive defenses. It's not about replacing existing tools or practices, but rather using them in tandem with Zero Trust strategies to stay ahead of today's evolving threats. The transformative power of Zero Trust lies in how it rethinks security, not as a singular boundary, but as an ongoing process. Organizations adopting this mindset are better prepared to respond to incidents, adapt to the expanded cloud-first work environment, and protect sensitive data regardless of where or how it's accessed. For example, a healthcare business might use Microsoft Entra ID to smoothly implement conditional access across cloud applications while layering encryption across patient data shared remotely by employees. This integration ensures that security and accessibility go hand in hand, building trust with patients, partners, and staff. But Zero Trust isn't about paranoia, it's preparation. It's assuming not that threats might one day reach your environment, but that they've already found their way inside. By designing every layer of access and security to validate everything, organizations are better equipped to halt breaches before they escalate. Think of it as building a network that assumes failure at every point, yet remains resilient through redundancy and validation. So you might be wondering how this all fits together in practice. If Zero Trust focuses on minimizing trust in devices, users, and networks, what happens to the actual information being protected? Sensitive data isn't just stored. It's constantly on the move across networks, between apps, and often across global boundaries. That raises the question, how do you ensure that no matter where data goes, its security stays intact? This is where encryption and hashing step in, and we'll explore those concepts next. Encryption and hashing, securing your data at every step. What's the difference between scrambling data and locking it away with a key? It's a question that often surfaces when we talk about securing information. While people may use terms like encryption and hashing interchangeably, they are fundamentally different processes with unique roles in protecting sensitive data. Encryption and hashing act as two of the most powerful techniques in any security framework, yet they serve distinct purposes. Understanding these methods and when to use them will give you a clearer picture of how to keep data safe at every stage. Let's start with encryption. At its most basic level, encryption is the process of transforming readable data, known as plaintext, into unreadable data called ciphertext. This transformation makes the data indecipherable to anyone who doesn't have the correct decryption key. Encryption is all about confidentiality, ensuring that even if an unauthorized person gains access to the data, they can't make use of it. There are two primary types of encryption: symmetric and asymmetric. Each plays a unique role depending on the situation. Symmetric encryption is straightforward. It uses one key for both encrypting and decrypting the data, which makes it incredibly efficient when handling large amounts of information. Imagine writing a message in code and locking it in a box with a single key. Both you and the recipient need the same key to unlock the box and read the message. This simplicity makes symmetric encryption ideal for securing data stored in one place, like files on a hard drive or databases within a private network. However, there's a trade-off. The key itself becomes the weak link. If it's lost, stolen, or shared with the wrong person, your security is compromised. That's why organizations using symmetric encryption need robust processes to securely distribute and manage keys. For example, when encrypting application logs stored on a server, the focus isn't just on encrypting the files, but also on ensuring the encryption key doesn't end up somewhere it shouldn't, like an unlocked folder. Now, let's shift to asymmetric encryption, which takes the concept of keys to another level. Instead of one key, it uses a pair of keys, a public key for encryption and a private key for decryption. These two keys are mathematically related but cannot substitute for one another. Picture this as locking a box with a padlock to which only you have the key. Anyone can add items to the box, but only you can unlock it. Asymmetric encryption is most often used for secure communications over public networks where sharing a single key would be risky. For instance, when you log into a website using HTTPS, a public key encrypts the data you send to the server. Only the website's private key can decrypt that data, ensuring that even if someone intercepts the communication, they can't read it. This approach is also critical for digital signatures, where the private key proves the authenticity of a document or message, and the public key allows others to verify it. But encryption alone doesn't address every security need. That's where hashing comes in. Unlike encryption, hashing doesn't rely on keys and isn't reversible. It transforms data into a fixed length value called a hash that's unique to the input. The idea is that even the slightest change in input data results in a drastically different hash. For example, a short password like my password 123 might be hashed into something that looks completely indecipherable, such as 9ED6F928C1B4E685 EDB1DCE5F0933. Hashing is commonly used for verifying data integrity or securely storing sensitive information like passwords. Now, imagine what happens when you enter your password into a portal. Instead of storing the actual password, the system stores its hashed version. Each time you log in, the system hashes what you've entered and checks it against the stored hash. If they match, you're granted access. What makes this approach secure is that even if an attacker accesses the stored hashes, they can't reverse them to uncover the original passwords. However, because attackers often attempt to guess passwords by brute force or using pre-computed lists, like dictionary attacks, stronger measures are needed. That's where salting comes into play. Salting involves adding a unique random value to a password before hashing it, effectively creating a unique hash for every user, even if multiple users have the same password. For example, if two employees both choose password 123, their stored hashes would still look completely different thanks to the added salt. This small step makes brute force attacks far more difficult, as each password guess would need to account for the unique salt as well. So, how do encryption and hashing complement each other, and when are they applied? Encryption handles confidentiality by ensuring that only authorized users can read the data, often while it's stored or transferred. For example, data traveling from your computer to a remote server over a VPN is encrypted to prevent interception. On the other hand, hashing focuses on integrity. It ensures data hasn't been tampered with by checking whether the hash value of the current file matches the expected value. Where encryption secures information during its use or storage, hashing is more about confirmation, proving that what you have is what you expect. To make this easier to understand, think of encryption as a padlock and hashing as a fingerprint. A padlock only opens with the right key, reflecting encryption's role in controlling access. Meanwhile, a fingerprint uniquely identifies an individual, much like a hash uniquely identifies a specific set of data. These tools often work together in broader security frameworks to tackle multiple risks simultaneously. Encryption plays a vital role in protecting data at three key stages: at rest, in transit, and in use. Data at rest includes anything stored on a physical device, like a hard drive or cloud storage. Encrypting this data ensures that even if the device is stolen or hacked, it remains unreadable without the proper decryption key. Take, for instance, sensitive customer files stored in a Microsoft Azure database. Without encryption, an attacker who gains access to the server could steal and view all the data. Encryption locks that information down. Next is data in transit, which covers data moving across networks, whether it's an email being sent or files uploaded to cloud storage. Encryption here prevents eavesdroppers from seeing what's being transmitted. This is the backbone of HTTPS, where encryption allows secure communication between your browser and the websites you visit. Even if someone intercepts the data mid-transmission, it's effectively useless without the decryption key. Data in use adds another layer. This refers to data actively being processed, such as when an application accesses a database to retrieve customer information. Technologies like secure enclaves keep data encrypted even as it's processed, ensuring extra protection against vulnerabilities like memory attacks. All of these encryption stages enhance confidentiality, but hashing has its own role to play in ensuring that the data's integrity remains intact. Imagine uploading a file to SharePoint and then downloading it a week later. Hashing allows the system to check that the file hasn't changed during that time frame. If even one bit of the data is altered, the hash will be different, immediately signaling a problem. At this point, you might wonder where these techniques fit into a modern security framework. The answer is nearly everywhere. Whether your organization relies on cloud-first platforms like Microsoft 365 or a hybrid model that combines on-premises servers with cloud resources, encryption and hashing serve as defensive cornerstones. Microsoft tools like Azure Key Vault simplify encryption key management, while services like Defender for Cloud integrate both encryption and hashing into real-time threat monitoring. These tools not only protect your data, but also streamline how it's monitored, making it easier to maintain security without adding unnecessary complexity. It's also worth noting that these methods are crucial for compliance with regulations like GDPR and HIPAA, which mandate strict controls over sensitive data. Encryption makes it possible to meet those requirements by protecting personal identifiable information, PII, while hashing ensures systems can verify the integrity of records used for audits or legal purposes. Ultimately, understanding when to use encryption versus hashing isn't about choosing one over the other. It's about knowing how these tools work together. To create comprehensive protection, encryption shields data as it moves and rests, while hashing validates its authenticity. Together, they ensure that data remains not only safe but also trustworthy, giving organizations the confidence to operate securely in an environment where threats are a daily reality. Now, if this sounds like a solid technical foundation, that's because it is, but technology alone doesn't make a system secure. The human side plays just as important a role. Security protocols need to align with policies and regulations to ensure organizations stay compliant while protecting users and stakeholders. That raises an important question: how do businesses tie these technical protections into governance and regulatory frameworks? To answer that, we'll dive into governance, risk, and compliance, the GRC framework, next. So far, you've seen how encryption and hashing handle the technological side of security. Next, we'll discuss how organizations manage the legal and operational side by integrating these practices into the bigger picture. Governance, risk, and compliance, the GRC framework. How do you ensure your organization meets all the legal and regulatory requirements it faces without getting buried in endless paperwork and processes? It might sound like an overwhelming challenge, but this is exactly what the Governance, Risk, and Compliance, or GRC framework, is designed to solve. GRC brings structure and clarity to the often chaotic process of managing regulatory obligations, mitigating risks, and ensuring that organizations operate ethically and responsibly. It's not just about ticking boxes. Done right, GRC can transform how a business operates, reducing risks and improving trust with stakeholders. Let's start with governance, which forms the backbone of a GRC framework. Governance refers to the system of rules, procedures, and processes your organization uses to direct and control its activities. In practical terms, this means deciding who can access what resources under what conditions and for how long. Think of it as setting the house rules for how data and systems are managed. Governance ensures everyone understands their responsibilities and that there's a clear structure for accountability. Not only does this improve operational transparency, but it also ensures alignment with external standards like industry regulations and legal mandates. Here's an example of governance in action. Imagine your organization stores sensitive customer information in a cloud database. Governance dictates the rules around how that data can be accessed. In this case, perhaps only certain employees have permission to view it, and only under specific conditions, such as from a secure device connected through a company-approved network. These controls prevent unauthorized access and ensure data integrity, supporting both internal safety protocols and compliance with external obligations. Without these rules in place, it's easy for misuse, accidental or otherwise, to occur. However, governance can't prevent risks entirely, and that's where the second component of GRC, risk management, enters the equation. Risk management is all about identifying, evaluating, and mitigating threats that could negatively impact your business or your customers. Risks can come from anywhere. External threats like security breaches, natural disasters, or economic instability, or internal issues such as employee error, misuse of data, or fraudulent activity. Every organization will face a mix of these risks, and the role of risk management is to minimize their impact. A critical part of risk management is prioritizing. Not all risks are equal. Some may represent a minor inconvenience, while others could create catastrophic consequences. Let's say you've identified two risks. One, the possibility of a phishing attack targeting employees, and two, a delay in updating internal software patches. While both are important, the phishing attack could lead to immediate data theft, impacting customers and exposing your organization to legal penalties. It may make sense to prioritize anti-phishing training and MFA policies as a mitigation measure before addressing lower-risk items. Microsoft tools like Azure Security Center play a vital role here. They monitor risks in real time, send alerts when potential threats arise, and offer recommendations for resolving vulnerabilities. For example, if the system detects misconfigured network security settings that could expose sensitive data, it doesn't just alert you, it provides actionable guidance to fix the issue. This balance between identifying risks and equipping organizations with tools to address them ensures that business operations run more smoothly while maintaining security. But identifying risks isn't enough. You must also ensure your organization complies with external regulations and expectations. That brings us to the third pillar of GRC, compliance. Compliance involves adhering to local, national, and international regulations that govern privacy, security, and how data should be handled. These rules determine the types of data that need protection, establish processes to meet legal obligations, and lay out penalties for those who fail to follow them. Importantly, compliance and security are related but not interchangeable. Security refers to the broader process of protecting data through tools, policies, and best practices. Compliance, on the other hand, ensures legal standards are met. You can think of compliance as your organization's legal GPS, guiding it on how to operate ethically and lawfully while avoiding fines or penalties. For example, under the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, organizations must implement specific measures like data encryption and strict access controls to protect sensitive personal information. Microsoft's Compliance Manager simplifies this process by providing a centralized dashboard that tracks regulatory requirements and identifies areas where your organization may fall short. Let's focus on one key area of compliance: privacy. Privacy regulations are designed to ensure organizations collect, process, and share personal data transparently and responsibly. Personal data refers to any information that identifies or could identify an individual. Privacy rules mandate everything from obtaining explicit consent to notifying customers about how their data will be used. For instance, if a customer fills out a form on your website, you need to explain why you're collecting their email address, how it will be stored, and whether it will be shared with third parties. Violating these rules doesn't just lead to financial penalties, it can permanently damage trust with your users. Data residency and sovereignty also play significant roles in compliance. Data residency refers to where data is physically stored. Many countries have specific laws requiring certain types of data to remain within their borders. Data sovereignty ensures that even if the data is physically stored in another location, it remains subject to the laws of the nation where it originated. For example, an organization based in the European Union must comply with GDPR regulations even if the servers hosting its data are located in another country. These principles demand careful oversight when working with cloud services. So where does Microsoft fit into all this? Microsoft's tools aim to make navigating GRC as seamless as possible. One standout here is Microsoft Purview, a platform that integrates governance, risk, and compliance solutions into a single workspace. With tools like data loss prevention, insider risk management, and information protection, Microsoft Purview allows organizations to automate compliance tasks that would otherwise require significant manual effort. Imagine setting automatic policies to block employees from sharing sensitive customer information outside the organization. It's an example of how automation can enforce governance while reducing human error. Let's take another tool, Compliance Manager. It provides templates tailored to specific regulatory requirements like GDPR or HIPAA to help organizations quickly assess whether they meet legal standards. It also tracks improvement actions, which might include configuring encryption standards, refining access controls, or adjusting certain privacy settings across apps like Teams, OneDrive, or SharePoint. By streamlining compliance management, organizations can shift resources from repetitive tasks to strategic initiatives while maintaining accountability. An unexpected benefit of a robust GRC framework is how it streamlines operations rather than complicating them. While initial implementation may seem like added effort, a well-structured system reduces the chaos that comes with last-minute audits, unpredictable threats, or unclear responsibilities. Consider a healthcare company handling sensitive patient data. Without clear governance rules, employees might accidentally use unsecured platforms for data sharing, violating health privacy laws. With tools like Microsoft's Compliance Manager, this company could automatically highlight risky actions, enforce policies, and ensure all information is stored securely, avoiding unnecessary complications. It's not just about reducing risk or staying out of trouble either. A strong GRC framework builds trust with employees, customers, and stakeholders who see that your processes are designed to protect their interests. When customers know their data is being handled responsibly, it improves their confidence in your organization, which can even become a competitive advantage. In fact, demonstrating compliance during contract bids or RFP processes often sets compliant businesses apart from less prepared competitors. GRC also provides the flexibility to adapt as regulations evolve. Laws around data privacy and security aren't static. GDPR, for example, has influenced similar regulations across the globe. Without a structured way to track and adapt to these changes, organizations risk falling behind. Tools like Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager help automate tracking by updating templates and policies as laws change, letting businesses make real-time adjustments instead of scrambling to meet retroactive deadlines. Ultimately, GRC frameworks aren't just about rules and checklists. They're about protecting an organization's most valuable assets, its people, its customers, and its reputation. They help reduce risks, streamline compliance efforts, and strengthen governance structures, all while building trust and operational efficiency. With Microsoft tools simplifying the complex and evolving regulatory landscape, GRC becomes far more manageable, enabling organizations to focus on what they do best. But even with governance and compliance simplified, one question remains. What about the people themselves, employees, contractors, and administrators who access your organization's systems every day? Their identities are the keys to unlocking everything else, and protecting those identities is arguably the most crucial step of all. So far, we've talked about protecting data, systems, and processes. But next, we'll shift our focus to the most critical element, identity, and explore why it's become the new security perimeter in today's cloud-first world. Why identity is the new security perimeter? What if your identity was the key to your organization's entire security framework? That might sound surprising, but in today's interconnected and cloud-first world, identity has moved from being a background element to becoming the core of modern security strategies. It's no longer just about logging in to access your email or company files. It's about ensuring every person, device, and application has the exact level of access they need, no more, no less. Essentially, identity has become the new security perimeter. Instead of relying primarily on securing the internal network as organizations used to, security now starts with verifying and protecting who or what is trying to access your resources. The shift to identity-based security comes from changes in how we work. The old perimeter-based model was built for a time when employees worked in on-premises offices, accessed tools on company servers, and connected through secure corporate networks. But that model starts to fall apart as soon as you introduce remote work, cloud applications, and personal devices into the mix. These days, employees might be accessing resources from a coffee shop, using a personal laptop, or signing in to a cloud-based app like Microsoft Teams on their phone. The physical boundaries of the organization have disappeared, and that's allowed attackers to target vulnerabilities where the traditional perimeter can't reach. So, how does identity step in to solve these challenges? More advanced identity management systems shift the focus from where users are to verifying who or what they are. Instead of assuming that access requests coming from inside the network must be safe, modern strategies examine every single connection, regardless of its origin. The entire goal is to control who gains access, under what conditions and to what extent they're allowed to interact with applications, systems, and data. To understand how this works, identity management is often broken down into 4 critical functions: managing identities, authenticating access requests, authorizing actions, and finally, monitoring everything that happens. These 4 pillars work together to create a security framework that supports both convenience for users and protection for the organization. The first piece, managing identities, focuses on the creation and maintenance of user and device identities. When we talk about an identity, we don't just mean a simple username or password. An identity can represent a person, a device, or even an app, and it comes with a profile of attributes, things like their role, location, and permissions. Managing these identities ensures that they're accurate, up-to-date, and assigned appropriately. For example, if a new employee joins your company, their identity must be created and configured with access to only the systems and data they need. Similarly, when an employee leaves or changes roles, their identity needs to be updated or removed to avoid leaving unnecessary access open. Tools like Microsoft Entra ID make this process much simpler, even in complex environments where identities are constantly changing. Once an identity is established, the next step is authentication, validating that the person or system accessing the resource is who they claim to be. Basic authentication typically involves passwords, but as we've learned, passwords alone are not enough. They're vulnerable to phishing, brute force attacks, and credential leaks. Modern authentication methods use technologies like multi-factor authentication, MFA, which requires users to verify their identity through 2 or more methods, such as entering a PIN and confirming a code sent to their mobile device. Some organizations take this a step further with biometric authentication like fingerprint scans or facial recognition. Microsoft Entra ID integrates MFA seamlessly across apps and services, ensuring secure authentication without adding excessive hassle for users. Next comes authorization, which determines what someone can actually do after they're authenticated. This is where policies like least privilege come into play. Users or systems should only have as much access as they absolutely need to perform their role. For instance, an intern might need access to a SharePoint folder with internal presentations but doesn't need permission to edit client contracts stored in another document library. Authorization policies are often managed dynamically, adjusting access levels based on factors like the user's role, location, or device. For example, if a normally trusted employee logs in from an unknown location, they may receive limited access until additional verification is provided. This dynamic control helps organizations significantly reduce the risk of internal misuse or external compromise. The final pillar, monitoring, ensures that every action is recorded, from logins to file downloads to administrative changes. It's not just about capturing data, it's about using that data to enforce governance and detect anomalies. For example, if a user typically logs in from the same device between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., but suddenly tries to access sensitive systems at 3 a.m. from another country, monitoring tools will pick up the inconsistency and flag it. These insights strengthen an organization's ability to respond proactively to threats. Microsoft's tools include detailed reporting and alerting systems that make it easy to identify suspicious behavior before it escalates. A key benefit of modern identity systems comes from centralized management, and that's where tools like Microsoft Entra ID and Single Sign-On, or SSO, shine. SSO allows users to log in once and access multiple applications without juggling multiple passwords. For example, a user signed into Microsoft Entra ID might access Microsoft 365 apps, a third-party VoIP system, and even custom internal tools, all with the convenience of one identity. Not only does this make the user experience smoother, but it also reduces password-related security risks by lowering the number of credentials users have to manage. On a broader scale, this centralization simplifies IT administration, allowing organizations to enforce consistent policies across all systems. Federation takes SSO a step further by enabling seamless collaboration across multiple organizations or domains. Let's say your company works closely with a vendor whose employees need limited access to certain systems. Instead of issuing your vendor's employees separate usernames and passwords for your environment, Federation allows their existing identities to be trusted by your system. Their identity provider handles the authentication, and a trust relationship between the two organizations' systems grants access without requiring new accounts. This trust relationship is particularly valuable in global multi-organization ecosystems. What's driving the growing importance of identity in today's environment? Simply put, the numbers don't lie. Research shows that somewhere between 70–80% of security breaches start with compromised credentials. This could mean passwords stolen in phishing attacks, credentials being shared carelessly, or attackers exploiting accounts with unnecessarily high access privileges. With traditional perimeter defenses unable to stop these insider-focused threats, successful identity-based security becomes the dividing line between a minor inconvenience and a full-scale breach. Microsoft's identity tools also address the challenge of scale. Traditional systems like on-premises Active Directory were designed for local environments. While they've adapted over time, the rise of cloud services and personal devices required a more flexible and scalable solution. Microsoft Entra ID, part of the broader Microsoft Entra ecosystem, brings cloud readiness to identity management. It integrates across SaaS applications, hybrid environments, and diverse devices, allowing organizations to enforce policies consistently regardless of where or how their users access resources. Effective identity-based security addresses threats in ways that traditional network perimeters simply can't. For example, imagine a company whose employees access sensitive customer data using personal laptops while traveling. With strong identity management in place, administrators could enforce conditional access policies. Policies might include blocking downloads of sensitive data onto unapproved devices or requiring multi-factor authentication if an access attempt is made from an untrusted network. These kinds of controls recognize that security is no longer about securing the building, it's about securing every connection. The rise in zero-trust security models also complements this shift toward identity at the center. By treating all access attempts as potentially hostile, zero-trust uses identity as the first layer of defense. The recurring verification of logins, devices, and access conditions ensures ongoing protection even in unpredictable scenarios. To sum up, securing identities secures everything else. Whether it's safeguarding sensitive financial data, protecting intellectual property, or ensuring compliance with privacy laws, having a strong identity framework reduces both risks and complexity. With tools like Microsoft Entra ID offering scalability, accuracy, and simplicity, organizations can focus on their goals with the confidence that their systems and data are protected. The future of security starts here, with protecting the who behind every interaction. But managing identities and addressing security challenges are just the beginning. The next logical question is, how do you take all these concepts, shared responsibility, layered defense, zero trust, encryption, and identity, and apply them in your actual work? That's exactly what we'll explore next, as we look at practical steps for Microsoft users to integrate these strategies into their daily workflows. Putting it all together, practical steps for Microsoft users. How can you apply everything you've learned to make a real difference in your work? Let's take everything we've discussed: shared responsibility, defense in depth, zero trust, encryption, identity management, and the governance, risk, and compliance framework, and talk through how these concepts translate into practical changes in your day-to-day workflows. It's one thing to understand these theories, but integrating them without getting overwhelmed is where the real challenge lies. The good news is that with Microsoft tools, this process becomes manageable, whether you're a data analyst, an administrator, or someone supporting your team's IT strategy. A great starting point is thinking about the shared responsibility model because it sets the stage for understanding what you need to protect versus what the cloud provider secures on your behalf. In an Azure-based application, for instance, physical security at the data center and basic infrastructure protections are handled by Microsoft. But once you upload business-critical files to a virtual machine or database, safeguarding access to those resources becomes your job. Practical steps here could include setting up Azure Role-Based Access Control, RBAC. This allows you to define exactly which users or groups can manipulate specific datasets or configurations. For example, assign read-only access to team members who only need to review financial records while granting full permissions to accounting specialists working directly with budgets. This ensures you meet the shared responsibility model halfway by clearly defining roles and securing your side of the cloud. While implementing access controls is a strong start, It's not enough to rely on a single layer of protection. That's where applying defense in depth strengthens your setup. A perfect example of this is configuring layered protections for data stored in Power BI. First, secure access to Power BI workspaces with Microsoft Entra ID and enforce multi-factor authentication, MFA, for anyone attempting to view sensitive dashboards. Then, enhance protection by applying encryption both at rest and in transit for data within your datasets. Tools like Microsoft Purview Data Loss Prevention, DLP, policies add another layer by restricting actions like exporting reports with confidential information to unmanaged devices. These steps create individual defenses that work together, blocking threats from multiple angles. So if one layer like MFA is bypassed, encryption and policy-based controls are there to catch potential breaches before they escalate. The Zero Trust mindset enhances these layers further with its never trust, always verify philosophy. Think about how often employees access work resources remotely, on personal devices from non-office networks and via public Wi-Fi. Without zero trust principles in place, a valid password might permit access without additional checks, even during these riskier scenarios. By combining conditional access policies with real-time risk analysis, Microsoft Entra ID ensures that verification goes beyond trust alone. For instance, an employee working from a known location on a compliant device might log in with minimal friction, whereas someone logging in from a random cafe might trigger stricter controls like requiring additional verification or restricting access to specific corporate apps. This dynamic control reduces exposure to phishing attacks and credential misuse while balancing security with productivity. But Zero Trust isn't just about users. It applies to devices and apps too. Take endpoint devices, for example. Using Microsoft Endpoint Manager, you can enforce compliance checks to ensure all devices meet specific security baselines before granting access. A laptop running an outdated operating system or missing critical patches could be blocked automatically, protecting the network from vulnerabilities. Combine this with app-specific permissions, such as restricting what users can do in Teams or OneDrive, and you've built a much tighter security environment than relying on a traditional perimeter. These strategies ensure that no resource, whether user, device, or service, is granted more access than necessary. When it comes to protecting the data itself, encryption and hashing play a direct role in maintaining confidentiality and integrity, both during storage and transit. Microsoft provides built-in tools for data encryption across its services. For instance, Azure SQL Database offers transparent data encryption, TDE, to ensure that sensitive data is encrypted at rest with no additional configuration required. For transit, consider enabling HTTPS connections on any web-based application you manage, ensuring that all interactions between users and the app are encrypted. Meanwhile, hashing can be implemented for verifying data integrity. An example could be using Azure DevOps to validate code files. By generating hash values during check-ins and comparing them during deployment, you can detect unauthorized changes and confirm file authenticity before pushing updates live. Let's switch to the governance, risk, and compliance framework. How do you make it actionable? Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager simplifies this by giving you a clear breakdown of regulatory requirements relevant to your industry and region. Whether it's adhering to standards like GDPR for handling customer data or meeting HIPAA requirements for healthcare-related information, Compliance Manager provides templates with suggested actions. For example, if you're running a SharePoint environment with customer data, the tool might recommend strengthening file access controls or enabling advanced audit logs. These actions aren't just about ticking boxes. They ensure smoother audits, fewer compliance risks, and ultimately better protection for your stakeholders. Speaking of governance, automating policies can reduce manual oversight while maintaining control. Let's say your organization wants to prevent accidental data sharing. You could configure Purview information protection policies that automatically label documents containing sensitive terms, like social security numbers or banking details, as confidential. Should someone try to share these files externally, the system could block the action or request administrator approval. Meanwhile, insider risk management features in Purview can monitor for unusual insider activities like high-volume file downloads or repeated attempts to access restricted resources. This proactive approach means you're not just reacting to issues, you're preventing them in the first place. Microsoft Defender also plays a vital role here, especially in threat monitoring and response. With tools like Defender for Cloud, you get real-time insight into potential vulnerabilities or breaches across your Azure environment. Let's say a developer accidentally opens unnecessary ports on a virtual machine. Defender for Cloud flags this as a security risk, provides remediation steps, and even offers automated fixes to reduce attack surfaces. Similarly, Defender for Identity monitors access patterns to detect unusual behavior, like an administrator account being used outside business hours from a foreign IP address. These integrated solutions make it easier to manage risks without needing to constantly supervise every detail manually. But identity remains the most critical part of all these measures because it governs who is accessing what, when, and how. Setting up strong identity management through Microsoft Entra ID lets you integrate single sign-on (SSO) across your organization's apps, reducing password fatigue for users while improving security. Complement this with MFA, which has been shown to block over 99% of attacks on accounts. Also, don't overlook the value of tracking permissions regularly through access reviews. For example, Azure Active Directory offers periodic attestations for group memberships and user privileges, ensuring that only those who still need access retain it. Whether it's granting external contractors temporary permissions or revoking outdated roles from employees who've shifted responsibilities, these cleanups reduce vulnerabilities created by excess access. So, how do these steps translate into real outcomes? Let's consider an example. A small business using Microsoft 365 might start by enforcing MFA through Entra ID, giving employees secure, easy access while mitigating risks from password-only logins. Next, they configure compliance labels in Purview to classify financial reports automatically as highly confidential and restrict downloads to managed devices. Then they implement a layered defense in-depth strategy, encrypting sensitive Excel file libraries with Azure Key Vault, segmenting network traffic through virtual private networks, VPNs, and applying conditional access rules to block access from untrusted regions. Each of these measures, while small on its own, contributes to a comprehensive security posture. Integration is also key to efficiency. The beauty of Microsoft's ecosystem lies in how these tools interact seamlessly. For example, Purview's compliance tracking feeds directly into Security Center, where alerts from Defender consolidate with insights from Entra ID. You're not managing siloed solutions, you're building a unified security dashboard that allows real-time visibility and fast decision-making. Automated workflows like triggering email alerts for critical compliance errors can cut response times dramatically, ensuring issues don't snowball into crises. But complexity can still feel overwhelming, even with these tools helping to streamline your work. Here's where periodic assessments come in. Schedule quarterly security reviews to evaluate your systems against Microsoft Secure Score, a tool that measures your organization's security posture and recommends improvements. This could involve strengthening encryption protocols, refreshing outdated security policies, or simply ensuring your compliance dashboards are updated with the latest regulatory standards. These ongoing evaluations create a culture of continuous improvement rather than a one-off checklist approach. Are these steps foolproof? Not entirely. No system ever is. But implementing them can significantly reduce risks while also improving efficiency and trust. By automating repetitive compliance tasks, monitoring critical systems in real time, and prioritizing identity-based security, your organization gains more than just protection. You gain the freedom to innovate without fear that security gaps hold you back. So, where do you begin? Start with small, actionable steps. Configure MFA today if you haven't already. Implement encryption on your most sensitive datasets. Begin tagging documents in Purview with compliance labels to prevent accidental sharing. The idea isn't to overhaul your entire system overnight, but to gradually layer strong practices across each area of your organization. Over time, these changes will create a resilient security foundation capable of adapting to changing threats and technologies. That brings us to a critical realization. Security and compliance aren't just technology concepts. They're tools for building confidence, fostering trust, and empowering teams to achieve more. Whether you're using Microsoft Defender to monitor vulnerabilities, Azure to securely host applications, or Purview to manage compliance tasks. These tools give you the ability to focus on what matters most: running a successful, innovative organization in today's increasingly complex digital world. With these practical steps in mind, you're ready to take action. But what's next in your journey? Up next, we'll explore how you can push your skills even further, ensuring your security expertise isn't just applied in your daily work, but recognized at the industry level. Mastering security, compliance, and identity isn't just about protecting data, it's about enabling trust, growth, and innovation. These fundamentals redefine how organizations manage risk and adapt to modern challenges, and they create opportunities for professionals willing to embrace them. Certifications like Microsoft's SC-900 validate your understanding of these core concepts while demonstrating your ability to apply them. They not only strengthen your career, but also show your commitment to staying ahead in this critical field. Start implementing what you've learned today and take the next step by earning certification. Your expertise can drive meaningful change in your organization's security strategy.